TV.
Hello and welcome to the local campaign and the Cambridge debate. I'm your moderator, Dan Polischuk. Tonight we have 5 candidates participating in our debate, and they are as follows. Brian May representing the Liberal Party of Canada, Scott Hamilton from the NDP, Michelle Braniff of the Green Party of Canada, David Haskell representing the People's Party of Canada, and Sonny Atwell from the Conservative Party of Canada. Also running in this riding but unable to attend tonight's debate are Manuel Couto of the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada and Greg McMorrow of the Veterans Coalition Party of Canada. Now, to start things off, candidates will have 2 minutes to deliver opening remarks. So with that in mind, we'll begin with Mr. Brian May of the Liberal.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with all of you this evening. My name is Brian May, and I've been honored to be your Member of Parliament for the past 4 years for Cambridge, North Dumfries, and North Brent. Even before I was involved in politics, I have spent my life fighting for people who need help, building up our community, working with families, youth, and seniors. I'm deeply connected to Cambridge. I've lived in Cambridge for nearly 20 years, and I'm a graduate from the University of Waterloo. I'm proud that my wife and I, along with our 2 children, call Cambridge home. We are blessed with a great community, and our government has been making communities like Cambridge even better with the realistic and responsible programs that we've set forth. As your Member of Parliament, I've seen firsthand how our country is stronger when we don't leave anyone behind. My career before politics was in the nonprofit sector as manager of the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and the University of Waterloo. I've also seen the impact and progress that our community has made through my volunteer work as a coach and as a board member of the Social Planning Council for Cambridge and North Dumfries. During those experiences, I've seen the impact that policies make, how it defines our relationships with each other, and how policy, when done well, makes an impact on the lives of all Canadians. I'm running to build upon the progress that we've made over the past 4 years. The fact is that our economy is strong, poverty is in decline, and our government has done more for the environment than any in Canadian history. More than 1 million jobs have been created. We have the lowest unemployment in 40 years. Over 850,000 Canadians have been lifted out of poverty, 300,000 of which are children. But we have a lot more to do. That's what I'm fighting for. That's why I'm running, and that's why I need your support. Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. My name is Scott Hamilton. Cambridge is my home. It's where my wife and I want to raise our young family, and we're invested in making our community better. But why politics? Well, I used to work as a landscaper. I worked minimum wage in retail. I worked in human resources as a recruiter. And I went back to school as a mature student to study international politics. I could not understand why, despite all the knowledge that we have, we were still hearing so much partisanship, so much division, so many cheesy talking points coming from our politicians. So I went back to school, I worked hard, I earned a master's degree at the University of Oxford, a full scholarship to the LSE, and recently I've been teaching international and environmental security at the Balsillie School of International Affairs. I published award-winning articles, I've researched climate change, and I thought I would be a teacher forever. But my perspective changed about a year ago when my wife and I had our baby boy at CMH. And I started asking myself, what will his future be like? And it looks really scary. We're facing a growing opioid crisis, a lack of affordable housing exactly when wages have stagnated. We're facing attacks on education, healthcare, labor, and social services. And we are on the brink of a catastrophic climate change. This sounds scary, and I was frustrated, but the old line hit me. If you don't like what's happening politically, then run for office yourself and take action. And so that's why I'm here. Over the past 10 months, I've been listening to Cambridge, its residents, community leaders, and I'm ready to take what I've heard from you and lead us as a riding by taking our collective voice to the House of Commons. That's how democracy works best. We need a change, but we won't get to new places by following old paths. That's why, on October 21st, I'm asking for your vote. And together, we can build the future we want to see. So let's be good to one another.
Thank you. Ms. Braniff.
Hi, I'm Michelle Braniff. I've had an eclectic background I think would be very valuable in politics. I practiced law for a number of years. I was a mediator. I've taught at the post-secondary level at University of Waterloo and at college, and been a middle manager in the nonprofit sector. So I've participated at United Way meetings of nonprofit organizations, watching and talking about policy, how we wished it could be, and more recently I have my own business where I do kind of as a catalyst of social innovation. I do graphic recording and help organizations like the Region or Wellbeing Waterloo and nonprofit organizations plan social innovation. And I'm delighted to be running for the Green Party. It is the party of social innovation. When I looked at the policies in mental health and housing and poverty that I knew a lot about from my teaching and from my management career in nonprofit sector, the party has done the homework, we've done the research, and it's a party that's prepared to take on the dual challenge of the climate crisis and also our frayed social contract. It's the party of social innovation, ready to take us to a transition to a sustainable, caring society. So, we can do politics as usual, and maybe we're heading in the right direction, but as far as climate change is concerned, not fast enough, not hitting the targets enough. And now is the time for a change of course, and the Green Party is the party that will help us change.
Thank you, Ms. Braniff. Mr. Haskell.
Well, thank you. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Haskell. I've had careers as a high school teacher, a musician, a reporter, and a youth counselor. But currently I find myself at Wilfrid Laurier University, where I'm a professor. But my greatest joy are my 5 children. I live here in Cambridge and have lived here for 20 years with my wife, Maggie. Tonight you'll get to know me as a candidate, however, for the People's Party. The People's Party, also known as the PPC, is the newest political party, and we're also the fastest growing in the history of our country. At last count, we've fielded more candidates than the NDP and the Greens. Now, I'm focusing right now more on my party because the media doesn't give us much coverage, and when it does, it tends to be very one-sided. Incidentally, the bias from the media tends to come from the fact that we're the only party that will reject political correctness in favor of blunt, truthful discussion. For example, tonight, you're going to hear each of these candidates talk about the millions they're ready to spend on new programs to buy your vote. And I'll be alone pointing out that we are already $750 billion with a national debt. And if we want future programs for our children, we need to start living within our means. The other parties might talk about immigration, but they'll say how they want to raise it. On the other hand, I'll be the only one to say that the rates need to be lowered so that we come in line with the rates of the other G7 nations. We currently have a net rate that is 6 times that of France, 4 times that of Germany, and 2 times that of the UK. So tonight, watch what's said and watch what isn't said, and let that guide your vote. And I hope at the end you'll vote for me and the People's Party. Thank you.
Mr. Atwell.
Thank you. Thank you to Rogers TV and everyone watching at home. I am Sonny Atwell, your Conservative candidate for Cambridge, North Dumfries, and Northern Brant. You deserve a worker, you deserve a fighter, and that's what I am. I love this community. My family's been a part of Cambridge for over 40 years. We have 4 generations living in our riding. I was born here. I was raised here. I went to school here. And I met my wife here, and we're raising our 2 daughters here in Cambridge. I'm a proud alumni of Preston High School, Mohawk College, and Wilfrid Laurier. Today, I'm a small business owner here in Cambridge, and we employ local residents. I know what it means to work long, hard hours to get the job done, and that's what I'm going to do as your Member of Parliament. The last few weeks, I've been knocking on thousands of doors in our riding. And the number one concern I'm hearing at the doors is affordability, day-to-day living expenses. Who do you trust to put more money in your pockets for you and your family to get you ahead? A Conservative government will live within its means and put more money in your pockets so you can get ahead. It's hard enough to get ahead without the government making it more difficult. If you work hard, you should be able to buy a home, save for retirement, care for your children and your family. Growing up, I watched my parents make difficult decisions to get by. We have a plan for all Canadians to achieve their dreams and build a life they want. I'm running for Cambridge, North Dumfries, and Northern Brant. Why? Because it's time for you to get ahead, not just get by. Thank you.
Thank you to you all for your opening remarks. We'll now move on to the question and answer portion of the debate, and questions will be posed by 570 News producer James Sebastian Scott and Cambridge Chamber of Commerce President Greg DeRocher. Thank you both for being here. Candidates will have 1 minute each to answer each question. Once all candidates have had a chance to respond, we will open up the floor for a few minutes at that time for open debate for the topic at hand specifically. With that, our first question comes from Mr. DeRocher.
Thank you very much. There are four main issues Canadians are concerned about in this election, and I'm sure you're familiar with Abacus data. David Coletto, founder of Abacus, was recently at an event I attended, and while climate change and taxes were one of the top four, they were well behind the top concern Canadians have, which is affordability. However, I suppose that touches on all areas of concern because in order to tackle the issues of the day, Canadians must be able to move forward in their lives. And frankly, right now, most Canadians believe they are in a worse position now than ever before. Costs of government are mounting, debt is rising, deficits seem to be the rage, and we absolutely know when government cannot meet its obligations, it has nowhere else to turn but then to the taxpayer. Since 56% of Canadians believe that affordability is the number one issue in this election, what will your party do to address this and make Canadians better off tomorrow than they are today?
And on the question of affordability, we begin with Mr. Hamilton of the NDP.
Thank you very much for the question, Greg. This is an issue I hear a lot at doorsteps. Recently, I met a couple. They were both working, they both had kids, and they were struggling to get by. They were struggling to pay for the pharmaceuticals, they were struggling to pay for childcare, and they were frustrated because the harder they worked, the less it seemed that they were getting ahead. So why exactly is this? It seems the Canadian economy has done very well under the Liberals if you only look at very large corporations and the wealthiest. Average Canadian wages have stagnated since the 1970s. But the cost of living has gone up substantially. Houses cost twice as much, tuition costs twice as much, food costs twice as much. So what the NDP wants to do is provide public services, childcare, pharmaceuticals, proper education. So instead of paying for essential public services out of their pocket, families have more money to put towards debt, and that's an easy way to climb out of it.
Ms. Braniff.
So the Green Party is interested in looking at taxations and sources for revenue. There are tax loopholes like the offshore tax dodging, and currently the Canada Revenue Agency it does random audits on everyone. You could divert those resources to actually focus on the people who are hiding money. So the platform of the Green Party has looked at a lot of places where we can, in terms of the deficit, where we can save money by looking at these loopholes, these problems. Eliminating fossil fuel subsidies will save a lot of money. And then there's big, giant e-commerce businesses like Google and Facebook and Netflix that aren't paying any taxes at all, and by having them register and collect revenue, then they can be paying taxes. So on the revenue side of it,
You can finish your thought there quickly.
well, we're also going to address things like affordability with housing and a livable wage and reducing poverty.
Thank you, Mr. Haskell.
Well, thank you for the question. So related to the cost of living, the People's Party wants to make sure that we are addressing the needs of the majority of Canadians and trying to unify Canadians while we do that. So one of the things that we want to look at is reducing taxes. We're going to look at the most vulnerable who are making the least amount of tax. If you make less than $15,000, you're not going to pay any tax with the People's Party government. If you make between $15,000 and $100,000, you'll only pay 15% tax. Now that's important because it means that you'll save thousands each year. In addition to that, we're going to end supply management, which is in fact producer price fixing on things like eggs, milk, and dairy. It means that you'll save about $600, and typically the most vulnerable economically are going to benefit most from that. Also, we're going to eliminate the cartel and the monopolies that we have for our cell phones and our airlines. when we have more competition, it drives the prices down. So that's going to help people as well. One last thing that we'll be able to do is we're also going to Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Did you want a chance to a second
fine,
to?
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Atwell, your response.
Yeah, affordability, that is the number one thing I'm hearing at the doors. Every day we're door knocking, and there's stories. I'll give you an example that we had just the other day. I was talking to, we'll call him Mr. Smith, and we're talking about taxes, and he goes, Sonny, I'm worried. I'm working hard. I'm working 12 hours a day, 5 to 6 hours, 5 to 6 days a week, and I look at my pay stub, and all this tax is getting cut. Where's our tax dollars going? Because we're not seeing anything. And today's, and then he asked me, where's the taxes going? And I said, well, did you know $250 million is going overseas? And I asked him, would it be a good idea to lower your taxes? So our plan is to lower income tax. We're going to bring it's called the universal tax cut, where it's going to save the average couple $850. It's a little bit, but it helps a lot. Green tax credit for home renovations, transit. For families, we're going to bring the tax cut credit for kids in arts and sports. And we're also going to help families by boosting the government contributions to RESPs by 50%. We're going to help you get ahead.
Mr. May, last response to you on the affordability question.
And thank you for the question, Greg. Quite frankly, our government, right out of the gates, took on this issue. One of the very first votes in the House that I ever had was lowering taxes for middle-class Canadians while raising them for the top 1%. Very quickly after that, we created the Canada Child Tax Benefit. This benefit goes to 23,000 children just in Cambridge alone, and it amounts to $80 million a year tax-free, just in Cambridge. This helped raise over 850,000 people out of poverty. But you're absolutely right. We need to continue to do more. We will change the tax code so that for the first $15,000, there will be no taxes. We're going to help, again, families by raising the CCB by 15%. We're going to increase student grants by 40% in Canada and cut cell phone rates by 25%. And we're also going to help seniors. This is easily the biggest issue that we have moving forward, and we have to make sure that we're going to help seniors by increasing the benefits that they receive.
We're going to get James, Sebastian, Scott in this discussion as well. So for your first question, Mr. Scott.
So we have our climate is changing very much, and a lot of people are worried about the future of the effects of climate change. And we had the climate strike that happened this past Friday, and there was a lot of discussion about it. If your party is elected, what is your plan to deal with the climate crisis we're facing?
And Ms. Brana, first response to you.
That's great, because the Green Party is already with an action plan, Mission Possible. And we call it Mission Possible because it's a large task in terms of cutting the emissions in half. So that's the emissions from the baseline level to for 2030 and then zero by 2050. And what's happened so far is we're not on track. The target was at 30%, and we need to go much faster. So the Green Party has an action plan. It begins with calling all hands on deck. So we're saying we should have an inter-cabinet of all parties, like they did during the war, so that it's collaborative. We're working together with long-term planning and as if we're doing a jigsaw puzzle, not playing games with politics. The climate is too important. We've got plans for transition to a green economy and moving away from oil and gas, and for buildings, transportation, and looking after workers while we make that transition.
Mr. Haskell on the climate question.
Well, thank you. For the People's Party, we are not climate alarmists. We're able to look at the other research that often gets suppressed. It's research from the MIT, Princeton University, and Oxford University. And when we look at the contradicting research, we say that the alarmists who are saying that the world is on fire, their alarm is misplaced. So what we want to do is we want to focus on those things that are going to benefit the most Canadians right away. For example, we're going to make sure that we bring clean water to Indigenous communities. We're also going to focus on clean air. Currently, 14,000 North Americans every year die directly from air pollution. But the other people who have become so fixated on CO2, They don't talk about these issues anymore. Clean water, clean air, and drinking water for Indigenous communities. That's what we'll focus on for the People's Party.
Mr. Atwell.
Conservatives do care about the environment. We do believe we need to promote a cleaner, greener, natural environment to protect air, land, water, and wildlife. But we don't believe that a carbon tax is the answer. Taxing families is not the answer for the environment. We believe in investing in green technology, not taxes. Carbon doesn't have a passport. There's no border. We need to take this fight globally, especially when you look at countries around the world like India and China. They're the major polluters out there. So again, we need to take this fight globally to the major polluters in the world and invest in green technology. Thank you.
Mr. May.
Thank you. The Liberal Party, for the last 4 years, our government has frankly done more in the area of environment and climate change than any in Canadian history. We put a price on pollution. We've established over 50 different programs with the force of $60 billion behind it. But we do need to do more. We do need to focus on this as the biggest challenge facing this generation. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050. We will set legally binding 5-year milestones based on advice from experts on how to reach that goal. We'll exceed Canada's 2030 emissions goal. We'll protect workers by helping them transition to new opportunities in the clean economy. And we'll protect the price on pollution from Conservatives who want to make it free to pollute again. And you know what? Sometimes these very complex solutions can be solved with simple solutions, or complex problems be solved with simple solutions. And we're going to commit to planting 2 billion trees in this country.
And Mr. Hamilton, last response to you.
Thank you very much. I always say beware of simple answers to complex problems, and climate change is an extremely complex problem. My PhD had to do with climate politics, and I can assure that yes, we do face a dire circumstance. We have only 10 years to cut our greenhouse gas emissions pretty much in half to be in line with the IPCC's most recent report. And that is possible, but what it takes is political will. Canadians seem to be very frustrated with politicians that say one thing and then do another. So what exactly will the NDP do? In order to meet these requirements, we need to understand that we need to change the way we heat our homes, the way that we manufacture cars, the way that we drive around on the road. To fight climate change effectively, we need full-scale action, and we need to start right now. So my vision for a riding like Cambridge is that we're the #1 producer of the future economy of electric vehicles, of grids, of infrastructure, of charging stations. Right now, if we want to fight climate change, we can do it with a great economy, but we need to build the future we want to see. And that's my plan for Cambridge.
A follow-up question, and this will go both to the Liberal candidate and the Green candidate. You both mentioned zero emissions by 2050. Why 2050? Why does that number stand out? Why is that the most appropriate? Why not sooner?
I think we have to look at climate change and the transition to a green economy very, very closely and very carefully. I believe I represent the only party that understands how critically important it is to balance both the economy and the environment. And quite frankly, if we go too quickly, if we move too quickly, we are going to leave people behind. We are going to have a generation that are unemployed and an economy that fails us. We expect all of the money that is generated, for example, through our energy sector, the taxes will be moving into supporting green technology moving forward. We need that transition period to happen. We can't simply flip a switch and expect it to work.
30 plus years of transition. Why do the Green Party necessarily agree with that time period as well?
We have to live up to our international commitments with the Paris Accord, and that lets us do that. And we're very, very behind in terms of what's happening in Europe and other parts of the world. So we've got to move, we've got to play catch up. And this is how the plan kind of works out. There's a piece of looking, so the Green Party wants to get out of the oil and gas and phase out of that 2030 to 2035. stop imports and exports to other around the world and supply Canada. So there's steps that need to happen, and it makes a lot more sense. I guess I'm agreeing with Brian that it makes a lot of sense. I would go faster than Brian, but it makes a lot of sense to be a realistic, set an accountable plan and follow it, than try to set something that we're not going to be able to accomplish.
And in the same breath, Mr. Atwell first, and then Mr. Haskell to respond there. But Conservatives, as you said, are looking to invest in green infrastructure, but with the proposed tax cuts, how do you propose to accomplish that?
With the tax cuts? Well, the big things we're going to cut is corporate welfare payments to mega corporations such as Loblaws, who were given $12 million of your hard-earned tax dollars for refrigerators. The other thing, $250 million was given to the Asian Infrastructure Fund, which is building roads and bridges overseas. We can barely fix our potholes back here, yet we're giving $250 million of your hard-earned tax dollars overseas. So those are where we're gonna save money. Also, $215,000 for Mr. Trudeau's vacations to the Bahamas, $17,000 to bring a personal chef to his trip to India. There's a lot of savings we can make from mismanagement of the current government.
Mr. Haskell, your response?
Yeah, I want to just talk about what we can do in reality. And so I want to just quote some figures from the International Energy Agency. Now, the International Energy Agency is the world organization that tracks how and where energy is produced. And despite billions of dollars in subsidies up to this point, only 5% of our energy is currently produced through green energy. Worst, here is the current development trends, and this is what the International Agency says, that at best, wind and solar can only provide 2.2% of world energy by 2040. So we have people up here who are making promises about jobs that the International Energy Agency, the research forum that looks at these things, says this just doesn't add up. So I want you to listen to what's said tonight, and I want you to think about it factually. And I want, sometimes the things that I'm going to say won't sound rosy, but they will sound factual. And we've got to be able to take those things that are true and follow through with them. Thank you.
And Mr. Hamilton, you want to jump in, but if you could tie into your response too, you were pointing out the local aspect and creating Cambridge as the #1 producer of the electric economy. How does that happen?
Sure. Well, it happens again with political will. So responding to David, the most recent report by the bank BNP Paribas discusses how gasoline is actually on the way out. It's becoming costlier and costlier to burn gas for ground transportation, while it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to make renewable energy sources. In response to Brian, I will say that it's difficult to declare a climate emergency and then double down and put another $10 billion into a pipeline. Those two things are irreconcilable. Either we're going to fight climate change or we're going to sacrifice the environment to the economy. Right now, we see a booming electric vehicle market. In the United States, for example, Volkswagen, GM, Volvo, they're not even building hybrids anymore. They're going all electric. Cambridge is an industrial town. It's a manufacturing town. My vision for Cambridge is that it leads the way of the future, following the trends of the global economy by building the electric vehicles of tomorrow, because they're coming. So either we're going to be building them or we're going to be buying them from someone else in 10 years.
Mr. May, before we move on, a quick 10-second rebuttal there for response.
I'm not sure 10 seconds will do it. I would just simply say the revenue that's generated from the pipeline that we will build to the west is going to generate about $500 million a year, and that money, 100% of it is going to green energy. That's how we get there. That's how we transition people effectively without leaving them in the dust. And quite frankly, you're right, Scott, in terms of gasoline being on the way out. But there is very little folks projecting that the oil itself, virtually everything that we're wearing, everything that is made here today, our cell phones, there is no suggestion that this is going to be not needed in the future.
We do have to move on, unfortunately, but thank you for those responses. Mr. DeRoche, your next question.
Maybe want to stay a little bit on the energy file. We'll talk a little bit about pipelines, and some of you have mentioned that, and you've also mentioned about the transition to the green economy. I don't think there's anyone on the planet anymore that doesn't believe in climate change and our need to do something about it. Everyone has their own tactics and ways, but what you need to understand is Canadians, that's their fourth priority of concern in this particular election. What their primary, of course, is what we talked about, was affordability. But what I want to ask you is about the pipelines. Two of your parties say you're going to abandon the Trans Mountain project as it stands. I don't maybe need to remind you, but maybe I need to remind the listeners that all of the taxpayers of Canada have invested $4.5 billion in already buying that pipeline. We also know that there is more fossil fuel being used today than there was yesterday. Growth in the global population is demanding more and more use because there's not reliable, firm, reliable replacements for it. So, during this period of transition, while the global, while the globe, the population in the world, are embracing new technologies and we're trying to get out of fossil fuels, we need to capitalize for the sake of our own economy on getting our oil to Tidewater. And that the safest and most economical way to do that is through pipelines. So I understand, obviously, you're not going to be in favor of the East-West pipeline either. Some of you who are in favor of the Trans Mountain, I'd like to hear if you're in favor of an East-West as well. But how do we preserve our economy and deal with the issues of the day? And the fact of the matter is, look at the taxpayers today and say, you've already paid $4.5 billion. We need to get some value back out of that.
So the pipeline question, Mr. Haskell, to begin.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, we have a very clear plan for this. Under the Constitution, Section 91(2), the federal government is able to say, for the purpose of trade, that we can advance projects. And that's what we will do. We'll make sure that the pipelines get done because it is a federal responsibility that the federal government currently, under the Liberals, hasn't taken that responsibility. They don't want to move forward. And so we see people who are in Alberta who are losing their jobs. And I take it that the environment is important, but at the same time, we have to be able to balance. It can't be just about utopian future. It actually has to be about the real future of real Canadians who are suffering and are going jobless. So we need to find that mix. Also, I'd point out that Trudeau put forward Bill C-69, and in that, it was brought before the Senate, and they said, can we please amend this? Because it's simply not business friendly. But they wouldn't accept it. The Liberal government wouldn't accept the amendments. And now it's known as the Pipeline Death Bill.
Mr. Atwell.
Yeah, we're dependent on oil for most of our transportation. And pipelines is great. We're going to build the pipelines. It's great for our economy. It's going to create more Canadian jobs. Yes, we're working on greener transportation technology, but right now we're dependent on oil. And we're shipping oil in from Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. Why not use our natural resources here in Canada, create Canadian jobs? It's great for the economy, and yes, we're going to build those pipelines. We need those pipelines.
Mr. May.
Pipelines, as Greg, as you mentioned, are the most environmentally friendly way to transport oil. We know this, and yes, there are literally hundreds of thousands of jobs in the energy sector that could be threatened if we simply turn off the taps. Many of those jobs are actually right here in Cambridge. We know that there's almost as many in the energy sector here in Cambridge than there is auto, and so there are quite a few jobs at stake here. But we've heard a lot already about things like C-69. We had 10 years of trying to get this pipeline built under the previous government, and they failed miserably because they didn't do two things. They didn't respect First Nations, and they didn't respect the environment. C-69 sets a path forward so that these pipelines can be built with those two key focus areas covered. And quite frankly, we have put a heck of a lot of effort through to make sure that this gets done, and we know that all of the revenue is going to be used to move us into that green economy and transition into that green economy.
Mr. Hamilton, a chance to respond?
Thank you very much. I place a tremendous amount of faith in small and medium-sized business owners, and that the way the economy works is that you have to adapt to changing market circumstances. You can't keep looking to the past. Right now we face changes in technology, in the environment, that are almost unpredictable, but we can deal with them and look at crisis as a series of opportunities. What we're doing right now, and we double down on pipelines, is that we're investing billions in what's essentially a vintage technology that has now conclusively been demonstrated to be destroying the fundamental conditions that we depend on for our current civilization. That itself, I think, is a large moral and ethical reason to say we can move off of this. And it also matches trends in the global economy. Right now, green energy is actually growing at a faster rate than fossil fuel technologies. Things like pipelines, the quality of oil they produce is becoming more and more expensive as green energy becomes cheaper and cheaper. And this is the global trend. We see it in the automotive industry. We're going to see it in Cambridge as well.
Ms. Braniff.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the transition to the green economy and disagree on pipelines. The oil is, the Canadian oil is expensive to produce in terms of the production, so they only make money when the price for oil is high. We're also in a situation where that industry is getting more and more automated, so it's becoming more capital intensive and less labor intensive as compared to the green economy, which is jobs in Canada for Canadians. So we're subsidizing. And never mind buying pipelines, but we're subsidizing by billions of dollars, as Scott said, something that's from the last century and is dying out. We could move that money into supporting the kind of energy we actually want, and also transitioning the workers to those green jobs. And as far as the money we already spent, there's something business people talk about that's sunk money. When it's gone, and you don't throw good money after bad.
On this topic, Mr. Haskell, and provided you wanted to respond there too, but if you could tie in your response, and we're curious as well, as your party does stand for a lot of provincial autonomy. And
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Provincial autonomy as
Yes,
well.
it does.
So as you're discussing, as adamant as your party is about getting these pipelines built, how does your party quantify this approach, allowing this provincial autonomy yet putting the stamp on this pipeline?
Well, you've got it half right. We are for respecting the jurisdictions of the Constitution. So if the Constitution says that the federal government can use 91.2 in order to advance trade within provinces, then we'll do it, because then that becomes a federal jurisdiction. What I want to point out is that Brian praised Bill C-69, and he said that it was a good bill for pipelines. And the thing that I find very interesting about that bill is that it shows the ideology that drives the Liberal government. I want to just quote a piece of it. It says that pipeline projects, will be judged according to the intersection of sex and gender and other identity factors. Now, when lawyers looked at this, they said, what does this mean? And it seems to me that we see in this something that's emblematic of the Liberal government. It wants to advance an ideological agenda, and it does so at the expense of jobs for Canadians, and it also does it in a discriminatory fashion to those who are not ideologically aligned to it. So when we look at, thank you.
Mr. May, a chance to respond there.
Sure, I'd actually like to respond to two points. First of all, C-69 was absolutely necessary. We saw the Harper government try to build pipelines to Tidewater for 10 years, and the courts kept saying no. We had to try something different. We had to move in a different direction. But I also want to just talk, I've heard two people, I believe Greg and also Michelle has talked about sinking money or spending money on this pipeline. This is an investment. This money is not gone. This pipeline, I believe the ultimate goal is we will eventually sell this pipeline down the road moving forward. And we've actually changed and created legislation that will allow First Nations for the first time ever to actually have stake and ownership in this pipeline. And I think that would be a win-win moving forward.
Mr. Hamilton, the NDP's viewpoint on that?
I was just thinking that if we look at the $15 billion that this pipeline will cost, $4.5 billion for the initial purchase, $10 billion in upgrades, even $500 million a year means that we're dependent on tar sands oil for over 30 years. That is a long time if we need to get off of fossil fuels right now. It's something our grandchildren will not forgive us for, and if we're still following a fossil fuel economy 30 years from now, the global economy will be much farther ahead of us.
Mr. Sebastian Scott, next question for the panel, or for the candidates, please.
We live in a very diverse community, not only in Waterloo region, but Cambridge as well. But many people who are part of the racialized community and LGBTQ community still face discrimination on a daily basis in this region. How will you as a candidate and your party support these communities, and what will you do if elected to help them?
And Mr. Atwell, first response to you.
Yeah, so I mean, discrimination, it's alive with every community. The first thing is, if we treat everyone equal, listen to everyone, when it comes to every community. So could you repeat that question again? What will our party do?
Yeah.
Basically be there, listen there, be at every event. Let every community know that, hey, we are with you. As your member of parliament, that's my job. Yes, Cambridge, North Dumfries, North Brant, we're a big community, we're a big riding, but within our riding, we have small communities, from ethnic communities, from different countries, and it's our responsibility as your member of parliament to be at every event and let you know that we're here for you. That's what we'll do.
Mr. May?
Thank you. And this is truly an important topic. We need to remember that Canada is stronger because of its diversity, not in spite of it. And I believe that over the last 4 years, I have demonstrated getting out into the community, getting out to every cultural event, being with folks when they celebrate their different religious holidays and different milestones. And I have seen firsthand how important it is to demonstrate that as a member of parliament. We need to continue to look at inequality. We need to continue not just on the basis of race or sexual orientation, but also gender. And I think we have absolutely moved the needle in terms of gender equality in this country, and also that of race and sexual orientation. C16 is a perfect example of this. Right. Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. The first thing the NDP would do is work to end the discriminatory blood ban that affects countless Canadians out there. The next is to work to end workplace discrimination against LGBTQ2+ individuals in our community. The next would be to accept refugees and asylum seekers based on LGBTQ2+ claims. There are thousands of individuals throughout the world that are persecuted because of their gender. Canada should be, as Brian mentioned, a welcoming multicultural space where everyone can feel safe because of who they are. Most importantly, as your member of parliament, the thing I'll mainly do is listen. I am a white male living in Canada. I don't know what it means to be a woman or be a black person in our community. All I can do is listen with an open heart and try my best to understand what my constituents and what Canadians are going through.
Ms. Braniff?
Well, we've made lots of progress, and I'm very grateful for that as a woman. It's my grandmother apparently wasn't a person back in the 1920s until the Privy Council said she was, and I'm glad that we have the vote and that we can work and make 73 or whatever % that men earn. But I think we can do a better job than that. So one of the things is recognize the disproportionate impact of gender-based violence. So 12% of all reported crime is domestic violence. Women are the victims. It's very, very underreported. We need to implement all the recommendations on the inquiry on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That's very, very important in terms of truth and reconciliation. It's also important because it is a women's issue. Increasing access to shelters by more funding. We also need to advance the LGBTQ inquiry rights by making sure that that we affirm the fundamental human right to access safe and comprehensive sex education and also medical treatments.
I have to stop you there. Mr. Haskell, your response.
Thanks for the question. People's Party government is different from all of the other parties in that we believe that Canadians should all be treated the same. We are completely against identity politics. For those who don't know, identity politics is this notion that you can get extra privilege or benefit because of skin color or gender. We don't want to see anyone treated differently. In fact, we don't care what your skin color is. We don't care what your sexual orientation is. We don't care about any external characteristics. What we do care about is that we all come together as Canadians. And the only way that will happen is if we stop with these different categories and stop the government from promoting these ideas. Right now, we are seeing social dissolution. And the reason for that is we have a Liberal government that's passing legislation like C16 that my government will repeal that says if you have a different opinion from your government, you're not welcome. What we want to see, the People's Party wants to see everyone treated the same with no special privileges for anyone, but everyone with dignity, respect, and compassion.
Mr. Atwell, first response to you before we go to Ms. Braniff.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, they love saying that diversity is Canada's strength. No, it's not. It's true freedom and true democracy. That's why my family immigrated here over 40 years ago. That's why many families come to Canada. It's for true democracy and freedom. Diversity just happens with it. It just came naturally.
First, give a chance to give a response from Mr. May, and then we'll go to Ms. Braniff.
Well, first of all, for those watching at home, C16 does not do what Mr. Haskell is saying that it does. C16 simply gives rights to transgender that everybody else has. Secondly, I do believe that diversity is our strength. If you look at other countries, such as the United States, where you're expected to be a melting pot in the United States, we are a true multicultural society, and this is something that I've grown up knowing, growing up. Appreciating as part of our country. And that's why I say, and I will repeat it, we are stronger because of our strengths, not in spite of them.
Ms. Haskell, a chance for you to jump in there.
Yeah, very quickly. Bill C-16 is the first piece of legislation in any Western democracy that compels speech. It says that we must agree that the feeling that you have can make you a man or a woman. So someone who says that a man and a woman, those categories are biologically moored, that they are biologically connected, now you can be forced to betray that area of conscience. And that's not fair. That's discrimination. And that should be protected under Section 2B of our Charter. But under the Liberals, those freedoms have begun to be eroded. If you don't agree with your government, you can be punished. Right now, we have parents who are arguing with the Ottawa Carleton School Board because their daughter was told that boys and girls do not exist. They went to the teacher and they were rebuked. They went to the principal, they were rebuked. They went to their school board and they were told, you cannot argue against this. These are two parents who want to say boys and girls are real, and they can't. And this is a factor of what has happened because of C-16 being brought in.
And just a reminder, we are just trying to focus on the local aspect as well. Ms. Braniff, your chance to respond.
Well, I don't know if I want to give some of those comments the dignity of acknowledging them, because it flies so much in the face of the values that I regard as Canadian values. There's a little thing, if you ever have run around a track, that the inside of the track, is faster. And so when you run a short race, the people at the outside start a little bit ahead. And it's so that it's fair and so it's equal. We have had a history that some people have had privilege and other people have not. And the current climate right now, and I think rightly so, is to say it should be fair and equitable for everybody. And I'm really I'm thinking Handmaid's Tale. I'm going to put on my red gown and my white hat because I might end up as somebody's sex slave or something. Anyway, I don't like it.
Mr. Hamilton, last response to you on this question. We do have to move on.
Sure. I'm going to echo Michelle, maybe not in the exact same words, but your sentiment for sure. Driving around Cambridge, I am a white guy with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I've never been pulled over because of the color of my skin. I've never had my CV rejected, likely because of the way my last name has been spelled. And so if we want real equality in Canada, if we want freedom and democracy for everyone, we have to accept that we have historical legacies of marginalization, of discrimination, that we have to overcome as a country. And so although I have to disagree with Mr. Haskell on this point, I think if we really want to have true democracy, equality, freedom in Canada, it takes an acknowledgement of our history and it takes work.
All right, last question to you, Mr. DeRocher.
I'm going to give you a really easy question to answer. In 2018, there were 1,564 businesses registered in Canada. In New Zealand, a country of the population 12% of Canada, we, in the same period of time, registered 58,167 new businesses. Currently, Canada ranks 22nd on the World Bank of Ease of Doing Business. New Zealand, on the other hand, ranks number 1, suggesting there's a correlation between the ease of doing business and attracting new investment. What would your party do to make us more attractive to new business investment?
Mr. May, first response to you.
Thank you. And Greg, I know you're going to like this because I agree with you that small business and medium-sized businesses especially need to be supported. We know that in Cambridge, the overwhelming majority of people that work here are employed by smaller, medium-sized businesses. And one of the things I'm most proud of over the last 4 years is the fact that I've been able to get out and visit a lot of these places and listen to them and hear what they need moving forward. I've been to over 400 businesses in our community, and I think that we have to recognize their big challenges. And I think the biggest challenge for small business, I may go off on a tangent here, but it's people. We need to get more people for these businesses. The number one thing that we keep hearing is that there is not enough bodies. We don't have enough skilled labor. And our government has been focused on this. We have focused on this through not just training, but also immigration. And we have to continue this process and make sure that businesses can thrive in this country and expand.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thanks very much for the question, Greg. The very first event I ran when I was a candidate for the NDP was something I called a listening tour with small businesses around Cambridge. I went around, I handed out flyers, I spoke with about 200 small business owners, had everyone back to my office to hear their thoughts and concerns about where we can go as a riding. Many of those concerns mirror what the NDP is proposing right now. So for example, lowering small business taxes, opposing unfair merchant fees, ending the unfair tax treatment for family transfers of small businesses. Pharmacare alone will save $600 to $900 for every single small business because small business owners don't have to worry about their employees being paid out through complicated insurance mechanisms for their needed medication. As Brian mentioned, skills and training are absolutely essential. The federal government should provide more money for training individuals in the community, but also new Canadians. We need to adjust the way we recognize foreign credentials so that someone who has a PhD in a particular subject or who is an expert plumber or electrician doesn't wind up in a job where they don't deserve and they can't provide for their family.
Ms. Braniff.
So there's a whole lot of what both Brian and Scott said that I agree with. I'm going to focus on what's different. I can't resist observing that New Zealand has proportionate representation, and that's why a whole lot of good ideas come from that country. So that's something the Green Party is in support of. Elizabeth Bay introduced legislation as a private member's bill that was, and it has been across Europe, and it was to think of small business first. So every time that any legislation or regulation is introduced, you ask the question, what's the impact on small business? And that focus and recognizing that small and medium businesses are not the same as the transnational, we need to have some subtlety and some nuance in terms of our policy, and that's possible to do that.
Mr. Haskell.
Thank you. Well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to lower the business tax to 10% for all businesses. Another thing that we need to do is we need to look at the Ministry of International Trade and get them to start training our small businesses as well. Have a greater dialogue there, because currently only about 4% of our small businesses, even our medium-sized businesses, are exporting. That's compared to 20% of other G7 nations. Another thing that we need to do is we need to look for new trade opportunities. And wherever there's trouble, there can also be an opportunity. So I would suggest that BRIEX might be something we'd look at. If the UK were to break away, they're going to be looking for new trading partners. We need to be proactive about that. Currently, the Liberal government is not very friendly to the idea of Brexit. And I'm not saying we should take a position at all, but their ideology is getting in the way of economic opportunity that may exist. So we need to look for those other opportunities, wherever they may be, to help our small and medium-sized businesses.
Mr. Ottawa, where does your party invest?
Yeah, so I am a small business owner. I'm also a fellow chamber member as well. And small businesses are the backbone of our economy and our community as well. The biggest thing is the government needs to get out of small businesses' way, let them do their thing, create jobs, help the economy. When I'm out there talking to fellow business owners and I ask them how's things are going, are you going to expand? Are you going to open a new location? And the first thing is, you know what, I'm glad I got in when I did, because right now, as much as the government likes to say the economy's great, I wouldn't get back into business again. The biggest thing is we're going to take regulation away. So for every new regulation that comes in, we're going to take 2 away, so 2 for 1. And the other thing is Mr. Trudeau, when he calls small business owners tax cheats, How do business owners feel about that? I mean, as a fellow, I roll pitas for a living. I sweep the floor. Yes, I'm a small business owner, but we work long, hard hours. And sometimes we work 60 to 70 hours a week to get things done. The biggest thing is we need to support our small business owners so they can create new jobs.
Yeah, well, this does actually bring an end to the end of the question and answer portion of the debate. Unfortunately, a lot of great discussion, but candidates will now have 1 minute to deliver their closing remarks. So with that, we will begin with the Conservative candidate, Mr. Atwell.
On October 21st, Canadians will ask themselves, who do I trust? In 2015, Justin Trudeau said he will do things differently and be a new kind of leader. But he has broken those promises and shown that he is not as advertised. He will raise taxes even higher to pay for his deficits. His carbon tax will go up and make gasoline, groceries, home heating even more expensive. His debt will lead to cuts to important services like education and healthcare. He will keep breaking election promises. A Conservative government will live within his means and put more money in your pockets. Life is expensive enough already without the government costing you more. Canadians cannot afford 4 more years of Justin Trudeau's shenanigans. It's time for you to get ahead. And remember to vote early and vote for Sonny Atwell, your Conservative candidate. Thank you.
Mr. Haskell.
Well, thank you. I know that some of the things that I said tonight are going to make people uncomfortable, but not everyone. For some people, what I've said has resonated. And if at some point in this evening you said, I like this Haskell guy, and I think I'd like to vote for him. But what about splitting the vote? What if I waste my vote? Well, let's take a look at that in context. Let's say last time you voted for the Liberals. They said that they would give you electoral reform. They said that they would balance the budget. Promise after promise was broken. That vote was wasted. We can look at the Conservatives. You can see who stood up for your values tonight. I'll stand up for you when I get to Parliament. You have to make a decision. Because just like with the Liberals, you've got a car with no driver, but when you go with the Conservatives, you've got no steering wheel. Andrew Scheer has shown he's not a leader. He's not willing to stand up for Canadians, and he's not willing to stand up for Conservative values. I am. Thank you. Vote for Dave Haskell.
Ms. Braniff.
The Green Party is ready to do a transition to a sustainable, caring society. And the environment, planet, there is no planet B. It's important. We have to look after it. We have to look after one another. That is what makes Canada the country it is. That I grew up with this idea of a social safety net, and we need to take care of that. We need to look after one another. We don't have to pick or choose between the economy and the environment. We can go with a green economy. We can have both. We don't have to choose between accountability and being caring. The Green Party has a plan, and it will also balance the budget in 5 years. So I'm going to say that if you want a society that is sustainable and is caring, vote your values. And I hope you vote green. Michelle Braniff.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you. I've knocked on thousands of doors across Cambridge over the past 10 months, and I've listened to countless community leaders and residents. And I invite you to check this out for yourself on my website, scotthamiltoncambridge.ca. I'm not just talking, there is action behind this. And I'm hearing 2 things that are consistent behind these comments in our riding. The first is frustration with the same 2 big political parties that have consistently let us down. The same talking points about the environment and the economy with very little action to back it up. The second is that Cambridge wants authenticity and honesty. An MP that's real, that listens, that thinks critically, and that can take their voice to Ottawa. My plan is to lead our fight against the opioid crisis, to push for more affordable housing, and to help make Cambridge one of the leaders in the green energy transition that is going to sweep the global economy. So on October 21st, don't vote out of fear or habit. We won't get to new places by following old paths. I ask you on October 21st to vote for Scott Hamilton, and let's be good to one another.
Mr. May.
Thank you all for watching the debate tonight. Canadians have a choice to make. You have a choice to make. You can choose to move backwards and return to austerity, cuts that slow down our growth, and a return to a time when polluting was free. Or you can choose a government that actually serves all Canadians, not just the top 1%. You can choose to continue with a plan that works, our plan, and we can keep moving forward together. Our record speaks for itself. The economy is booming. Our environmental work has taken real effort and produced real results in addressing climate change. We are 4 years into a 10-year plan on affordable housing, 15 years into a poverty reduction strategy, and a 20-year plan to fight climate change.